So imagine you're a local, unarmed spiritual teacher, right?
Okay.
You're out in this quiet garden late at night. You're just praying with a few of your closest friends.
Right. Pretty peaceful scene.
Exactly. But then suddenly the darkness is totally broken by the light of torches. You hear like the clanking of armor.
Cool.
And you aren't being approached by, a couple of local beat cops or a neighborhood watch. You are suddenly surrounded by a Roman military strike force.
Yeah, up to what, like 600 heavily armed, professionally trained soldiers?
Exactly, up to 600.
Uh,
So the question we're starting with today on this deep dive is, why on earth would the most powerful empire on the planet send a literal army to arrest one guy?
it's a massive overreaction.
Yeah.
And that intense, localized moment of just overwhelming opposition is exactly where we're starting today.
Right.
We're looking at one of the most widely known narratives in, well, human history. The arrest of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and then the subsequent denial by his lead disciple, Peter.
And for you listening, we're pulling this apart using a very specific piece of source material today.
Yeah, we have a transcript of a sermon, actually.
Right. It's titled Failing Forward, and it was delivered by Pastor Stephen at Dwell City Church. Now, before we go any further, I know what you might be thinking.
Right, like a sermon. Are we just doing Sunday school today?
Exactly, but not at all. We are putting this ancient text under a highly analytical microscope.
Yeah, we're looking at the military strategy of the Roman occupation, the bizarre, almost unbelievable legal anomalies of the trial.
Which are wild, by the way.
Oh, completely wild. And, the incredibly sophisticated literary structure of the historical record itself.
Yeah, and I think it's important to just, lay our cards on the table right up front.
Definitely. Look, the source material is deeply theological, but our goal today is not to endorse a specific religious stance or tell you what to believe.
Right, we're totally impartial here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instead, we're here to unpack the historical context, the legal procedural breakdowns, and the really fascinating arguments the speaker makes about human nature.
Yeah.
We're looking at how this text uses the concepts of failure, intense opposition, and seemingly catastrophic mistakes as, the exact mechanisms to move a larger narrative plan forward.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the speaker introduces a central analogy right out of the gate that basically frames everything we're about to discuss.
The maze.
The maze,
Yeah.
yes. So imagine you're standing in a massive, complex maze. You know exactly where the center is.
Right, you have a goal.
Yeah. And naturally, your instinct is that the correct path is the one that moves you physically, geometrically closer to that center.
Makes sense.
But as anyone who's ever done a complex maze knows, you inevitably hit a solid wall.
Yeah, dead end.
Right. And the only open path forces you to turn your back on your goal and walk in the exact opposite direction.
And in that localized moment, your perspective tells you that you are failing.
Yeah, you're literally moving backward.
It feels entirely counterproductive, maybe even like a fatal mistake.
Mm.
But if you could zoom out and see the aerial view,
The architectural blueprint, yeah.
exactly, the blueprint of the maze, you'd realize that taking a step in what feels like the completely wrong direction is actually the required path.
Right.
The detour is literally the only way to reach the center.
I love that. And that abstract idea of the maze going in the wrong direction becomes violently literal in the very first scene of our source text.
The garden.
Yes, we start in that garden. Judas arrives to betray this teacher, and he doesn't just show up with a couple of angry temple guards. The text says he brings a, quote, band of soldiers.
Which is quite the understatement.
Right. And I have to stop here and push back on the source material a bit, because when I read the historical context of that phrase, my jaw genuinely dropped.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Like, is this a mythic exaggeration? Because sending hundreds of soldiers for one guy just sounds like, I don't know, ancient propaganda to make the story sound more epic.
Right. It totally sounds like an exaggeration until you look at the socio-political powder keg of first century Jerusalem.
Okay, lay it on me.
So the specific Greek term used in the original text is spera.
Spera.
Yeah, which is the Roman military term for a cohort.
Wow.
A Roman cohort was a massive unit. We're talking about anywhere from 200 to 600 professionally trained infantrymen.
That is insane.
Equipped with swords, spears, shields, the works. And to answer your question about why they would deploy that for one guy, you have to look at the calendar.
Right, the timing is everything.
Exactly. This arrest happens during Passover.
The major Jewish festival.
Yes. During Passover, the population of Jerusalem would swell from maybe 50,000 people to over 250,000 pilgrims.
So it's completely packed.
The city was packed tight, and Passover was a celebration of the Jewish people being liberated from a foreign oppressor.
The Egyptians.
Right. But now they're currently being oppressed by the Romans.
Oh, man. So the tension is just through the roof.
Exactly. So the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, he would bring heavy military reinforcements into the city every single Passover.
Yeah.
Because the threat of a violent nationalistic riot was at its absolute peak.
Ah, I see. Okay, so it's like sending an entire SWAT team and a fleet of helicopters to respond to a noise complaint.
That's a great way to put it.
But only because you think the noise complaint is actually the start of a massive citywide revolution.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is what that overwhelming force actually signals about the psychology of the leaders.
What do you mean?
Well, it tells us instantly that this wasn't viewed as just a mere theological dispute among local rabbis.
Right.
The elite had a very long, very bloody memory. The speaker points out that less than 200 years prior, a Jewish religious zealot named Judas Maccabeus had risen up, rallied the people, and successfully overthrown the ruling government.
Okay, so they're looking at this charismatic leader in the garden who has had massive crowds following him all week, and they are terrified.
Oh, absolutely terrified.
They're thinking, this is Judas Maccabeus version 2.0. This is an insurrection waiting to happen.
They anticipated a full-blown siege. They brought a cohort because they wanted to ensure this movement was crushed with such overwhelming intimidation that not a single sword would be drawn by his followers.
Wow.
It was an overwhelming display of physical force to solve a deep political anxiety.
But the physical overkill in the garden is really only half the story, right?
Oh, yeah?
Because if the Romans brought the military muscle, the religious leaders brought the legal corruption.
The procedural overkill.
Exactly. We're moving from physical overkill to procedural overkill. And this is the part of the source material that absolutely fascinated me, because ancient Jewish law was actually incredibly sophisticated, wasn't it?
It really was. It was wildly progressive for the ancient world.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Jewish legal system, which was overseen by the Sanhedrin, basically their supreme court, it was designed to be meticulously humane.
Really?
It was heavily weighted in favor of the accused. For instance, they abhorred the death penalty.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, a historical rabbinic text, the Mishnah, notes that a Sanhedrin that executed one person in 7 years was considered a destructive or bloody court.
One person in 7 years. Wow.
Right. They had strict, exhaustive protocols to ensure innocent blood was never shed.
Which makes what happens next so completely jarring.
Totally.
Because the very people whose entire societal identity was built on being the meticulous keepers of this humane law, they just completely dismantled it.
They threw it all out the window.
The speaker outlines that they broke at least 8 distinct major laws just to make this specific arrest and trial happen.
It's staggering when you look at the list.
Let's walk through the mechanics of this, because for you listening, this would be like a modern Supreme Court justice paying off a witness, arresting a guy at 2 a.m., and holding the trial in his own living room.
That is an incredibly accurate comparison.
Right. It's that blatant.
It really is. Let's start with the arrest warrant itself. It was fundamentally invalid.
Because of the bribe.
Exactly. Judas took a bribe. The famous 30 pieces of silver.
Right.
Under rabbinic law at the time, if someone accepted a financial bribe to betray the accused, their testimony was instantly legally invalidated.
So the whole thing should have been thrown out immediately.
Right. You could not initiate an arrest based on the word of a paid informant.
And then there's the timing, which, I mean, it was heavily regulated. They arrested him in the middle of the night.
Which was a massive violation.
According to their strict legal code, capital cases, trials where a man's life was on the line, were strictly forbidden from taking place outside of daylight hours.
The judges literally had to be able to see the face of the accused clearly in the light of day.
And furthermore, trials for capital offenses absolutely could not begin on a Friday, the eve of a Sabbath, or the day before a major festival like Passover.
And the underlying logic there was to prevent rushed emotional executions.
Right, they wanted a cooling off period.
Exactly. The law actually required an overnight delay for deliberation before a death sentence could be carried out. The judges were supposed to go home, drink only water, eat sparingly, and discuss the case in pairs to ensure they hadn't missed any exculpatory evidence.
And instead, they're doing a midnight kangaroo court.
Right. By holding this trial at night, right before a festival, they completely circumvented the mandatory cooling off period.
It's just a cascade of violations. I mean, when they grabbed him, there was no formal indictment. They didn't state specific charges upon arrest, which was required.
None at all.
On top of that, he wasn't provided a friend in court.
Yeah, that's a huge one.
From my understanding, the friend in court was essentially their version of a defense attorney, right? Like someone who was legally obligated to argue on behalf of the accused's innocence.
Yeah, and he had zero representation, none. And honestly, the corruption of the judges themselves is perhaps the most glaring anomaly of the whole thing.
How so?
Well, in this legal system, judges were highly esteemed individuals who were legally bound to absolute impartiality.
Right.
Because of that strict requirement, they were forbidden from physically participating in the apprehension of an accused person.
Oh, they couldn't be part of the arresting party.
Exactly. A judge cannot be part of the arresting posse. Yet the text indicates chief priests were right there in the garden.
That's crazy. And to top it all off, capital sentences could only be legally pronounced in a very specific official location.
The Hall of Hewn Stones.
Yes, inside the temple complex. It was a public official space. They could never be decided in a private residence.
So they dragged him to a private house in the middle of the night anyway.
Right. So if we connect this to the broader thematic argument of the source material, it really makes a profound point about human nature.
It does. It shows the limitations of systems.
Yeah, simply having more laws, or even having the most progressive, humane laws in the ancient world, doesn't solve the fundamental problem of human corruption.
The law itself is completely powerless to make people act justly if their internal motivations are compromised.
Exactly. The mechanism of corruption works from the inside out.
If human hearts are bent on a specific, desperate outcome, in this case, preserving their political power, they will eagerly dismantle the very legal frameworks they claim to uphold to get it.
So if the official public legal system was completely abandoned, we have to look at who was actually pulling the strings in the dark.
The shadow brokers.
Right. Who is the architect of this illegal trial? The source material introduces us to two major power players operating in the shadows, Annas and Caiaphas.
Yeah.
And reading about Annas, man, he sounds straight out of a mob movie.
He really is the quintessential shadow broker. I mean, Annas is described essentially as the godfather or the Don of the Jewish priestly hierarchy.
Which is wild for a religious leader.
Right. Now, officially, he held absolutely no power. The Romans had deposed him from the role of high priest decades earlier, around AD 15, because they found him too powerful and independent.
But unofficially, he was still the guy running the city.
Oh, 100%.
How does a guy who gets fired by the Roman Empire still control the legal system?
It's all because of the clash between Roman politics and Jewish theology.
Okay.
Under Jewish law, the high priesthood was a lifetime appointment designated by God. But the Romans treated it like a local political office they could just swap out whenever they wanted.
Ah, I see.
So while the Romans recognized a new high priest, the Jewish people and the religious elite still viewed Annas as the one true, legitimate leader.
So he still has all the influence.
All of it. He controlled the lucrative temple markets, often called the bazaars of Annas. He had immense wealth, and he ensured his dynasty survived by having his 5 sons, and eventually his son-in-law Caiaphas, installed as the official high priests.
He is the ultimate puppet master.
Truly.
So when they arrest Jesus, they don't take him to the official court. They take him straight to Annas's private residence for this illegal nighttime interrogation.
Right. Annas is fishing for dirt.
Yeah, he's trying to drum up a charge that will actually stick when they inevitably have to bring this religious teacher before the Roman governor for execution.
And this brings us to his son-in-law, Caiaphas, who holds the official Roman title of high priest that year.
The guy on paper.
Exactly. Caiaphas is the one who has to officially sanction this. And the text records a chillingly pragmatic quote from him during a council meeting leading up to all this.
Oh, this quote is wild.
He says to the religious leaders, it would be expedient that one man should die for the people.
Here's where it gets really interesting from a narrative and literary standpoint.
Yeah.
The dramatic irony happening here is just off the charts. Caiaphas thinks he is making a cold, brutal, calculated political maneuver.
Very calculated.
He's looking at the massive crowds following this teacher, he's calculating the risk of a Roman crackdown, and he makes a utilitarian choice.
Right.
He figures if we let this guy keep preaching, the Romans are going to see it as a rebellion, they will march in here and they will slaughter our entire nation. So let's just quietly assassinate this one guy.
Sacrifice one pawn to save the whole board.
Exactly. But he views himself as the savior of the nation through the mechanism of political murder.
But the text presents it as something entirely different.
Right.
The speaker points out that Caiaphas, by virtue of his office as high priest, accidentally acts as an unwitting prophet.
It's incredible.
Without having any idea what he's actually saying, he verbally prophesies the very core tenet of the Christian faith.
The concept of substitutionary atonement.
Exactly, that one man would willingly die as a substitute to save the people.
He literally dictates the theological mission statement of the movement while he is trying to write a political assassination order to destroy it.
It's unbelievable irony. And the source uses this specific historical irony to make a larger claim about the nature of the maze.
Right, back to the maze.
The argument is that even the most intense, powerful, and calculated opposition is ultimately serving the larger narrative plan unknowingly.
Wow.
The people trying to aggressively dismantle the movement are the very ones laying the foundational bricks for its core message. The mechanism of their malice is repurposed for a larger mission.
So we have these untouchable political masterminds controlling the board, operating with absolute ruthless efficiency.
Yeah.
But a movement isn't just its leaders, it's the followers.
Right, the everyday people.
And while Caiaphas is sitting comfortably in his private estate, we have to look at what's happening to the terrified people who gave up their lives for this movement only to watch it violently crumble.
It's a dark moment for them.
What happens to regular people when the maze suddenly goes completely dark?
We see a massive, immediate scattering.
Everyone just bails.
Pretty much.
Mm.
The text notes that out of the original inner circle, only 2 disciples are left following the arrest. Peter, the vocal, fiercely loyal lead disciple, and another disciple, widely understood by historians to be John, the author of this particular historical account.
And John apparently has some high-level connections, right?
He does. He is known to the high priest, so he's able to bypass the guards at the gate and get himself and Peter right into the courtyard of Annas' headquarters.
So they are completely behind enemy lines.
Standing in the dark, freezing cold courtyard while their leader is being beaten inside.
And this is where we see the intense vulnerability of the movement's so-called heroes.
Yeah.
A servant girl keeping watch at the door recognizes Peter. She asks him point blank if he is one of the disciples.
And Peter, the guy who just hours earlier swore he would die for this cause, flat out denies it.
He just says, I am not.
Yeah.
I have to pause and look at this from a public relations and historical strategy perspective.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because if you're John, the author of this text, and you are trying to write a compelling document to launch a new global religious movement, why on earth would you write this scene?
It doesn't make sense from a PR angle.
You are trying to recruit people. If you look at ancient epics like Homer's Iliad, the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Aeneid, they might show a hero struggling physically or dealing with hubris or anger, but they rarely highlight the hero's most humiliating, cowardly moral failures.
Right. Achilles doesn't cower in front of a servant girl while his best friend is being tortured.
Exactly. It's terrible marketing to make your lead guy look so incredibly weak.
It is, which actually raises an important question. And it's a point historians heavily rely on when evaluating the authenticity of ancient texts.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's a historiographical tool known as the criterion of embarrassment.
How does that work?
The mechanism is pretty simple. When a historical account includes details that are deeply embarrassing, damaging, or counterproductive to the authors or the leaders of their own movement,
Yeah.
it strongly suggests the account was not fabricated.
Oh, interesting.
Because if John were simply inventing a myth to build a powerful new religion, he would have edited that embarrassing part out.
He would have written Peter fighting off the guards with a sword before being heroically dragged away.
Exactly. The fact that the lead disciples' catastrophic cowardice is left in the text suggests they were bound to report what actually happened, regardless of how bad it looked.
It's the maze again. Peter's moral failure feels like the ultimate dead end. The guy they are relying on to carry the torch just completely folded. The movement should be over right here.
But from a thematic perspective, the source argues this inclusion is highly intentional. It shows exactly how this specific movement operates.
Okay, unpack that.
It argues that this movement, unlike the Roman Empire or the Sanhedrin, isn't built on the absolute perfection or strength of its human leaders.
Right.
It teaches profound dependence. It's the theological concept that weakness is the exact vessel required to perfect strength.
Wow.
The speaker even cites the Apostle Paul later writing about boasting in his weaknesses, because the logic is that only when human strength utterly fails can a higher power step in.
The failure isn't a glitch in the system.
Exactly. It is a necessary feature to strip away human arrogance.
And the text uses a brilliant, incredibly subtle literary detail to show how this terrifying failure is actually a setup for something else. I am obsessed with this specific detail.
The Tale of Two Fires,
Yes, the Tale of Two
the
Fires.
sensory details of the courtyard.
Exactly. When Peter is in that courtyard denying everything, the author drops in this seemingly throwaway line in John chapter 18.
Right.
It says the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was freezing cold, and Peter was standing by warming himself while he betrayed his friend.
Yeah, and at first glance, it just seems like an atmospheric note,
Yeah.
just a sensory detail from an eyewitness to set a cold, dark mood. But smell is arguably the human sense most powerfully tied to memory and trauma.
It really is.
The smell of burning charcoal would have been permanently etched into Peter's mind as the scent of his greatest shame.
Right. And if you fast forward to the very end of the book, in John chapter 21, after the execution, after the reported resurrection,
Yeah.
the disciples are out on a boat feeling lost. They come to shore, and Jesus is waiting for them on the beach. And what has he made?
Charcoal fire.
A charcoal fire. He cooks them breakfast over it. And over that specific fire, he asks Peter 3 times, "Do you love me?"
Intentionally restoring him completely for the 3 times Peter denied him by the first fire.
The symmetry is striking. By recreating the exact sensory environment of the trauma, the text suggests a profound psychological healing.
Jesus doesn't let Peter avoid the memory of his failure. He forces him to stand next to it again and rewrites the ending.
It is incredible. It's like a brilliant movie director purposefully reusing the exact same set.
Oh, that's good.
Like the lighting, the props, the smell of the smoke,
Yeah.
using it for the character's lowest, most agonizing point of despair, and then using that exact same set to stage their ultimate redemption.
Wow.
The place of deep, bitter regret literally becomes the place of restoration.
It perfectly encapsulates the speaker's central theme, that the detour is the path.
Yeah.
The failure in the courtyard wasn't a departure from the plan. It was the required preparation for the person Peter needed to become.
So what does this all mean for you listening today?
Right. Bringing it back to real life.
The speaker ends with a modern analogy that brings all of this ancient history right into our present reality. Think about being at the top of a massive ski mountain. If your only goal is speed, efficiency, and just getting it over with, you point your skis straight down the double black diamond.
It is fast, it is linear.
But it is a blur. You miss the entire mountain.
Right.
But the winding path, the path that traverses back and forth, the one that routinely takes you away from the lodge before turning you back toward it, is the path where you actually see the beauty of the landscape.
That winding detour is where the experience actually happens.
Exactly.
And the sermon uses the mechanism of a blacksmith to drive this home.
Oh, I like this part.
To make a forged blade strong enough for battle, you don't just gently shape it. You have to plunge the steel into a searing fire, beat it with a hammer, and then immediately quench it in cold oil or water.
It's violent.
Very. That violent shock of heat and cold actually reorganizes the molecular crystalline structure of the metal.
Wow.
The intense stress is what hardens the steel so it won't shatter on impact.
So the failure, the broken rules, the profound detours, the betrayals.
They aren't interrupting the master plan. They are the extreme heat and the hammer required to reorganize the molecular structure of the people involved.
And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Yeah?
Think back to Peter. If Peter hadn't failed so spectacularly in that dark courtyard, if he had been the flawless, brave hero he thought he was, would he have ever developed the profound, desperate empathy required to lead a global movement made up of highly imperfect people?
Probably not.
We often judge the trajectory of our own lives by a single, isolated snapshot of failure. We look at a broken system, an unfair trial, or a moment where we cowered when we should have been brave, and we assume the story is over.
Yeah.
But if you are currently standing at a charcoal fire of your own making, feeling like the maze has led you to an absolute dead end, what if the failure wasn't a detour from your qualifications? What if the failure is the exact thing that is qualifying you for what comes next?
It's a powerful lens to view our own setbacks through. The worst moment of the story might just be the setup for the most important chapter.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the map, keep looking for the hidden architecture in the stories around you, and we will see you next time.